I think we could start.
Absolutely, wonderful. Okay, great, thank you. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sabrina Lavoie. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator in Concordia's Office of Sustainability. And first, to begin in a good way, I would like to acknowledge that Concordia is situated on lands belonging to the Giningahaga. And the Giningahaga are recognized as custodians of the lands and waters of Tiohtià:ke, or Montreal, and its surrounding area. And today is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. So we respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future through our current inhabiting of Tiohtià:ke and in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples in our communities. And when we talk about the Sustainable Food Systems Plan, which is the topic of today's discussion, we can reflect on some of the many practices that Indigenous peoples have and continue to implement to ensure sustainable food systems. And that includes the treatment of food as sacred, the inextricable ties between food, traditional knowledges, and land-based practices, and the leadership and wisdom that so many Indigenous peoples have shown and continue to show in protecting resources through principles of stewardship and reciprocity. So exactly 1 year ago, pretty much to the day, Concordia launched its first ever Sustainability Action Plan. And this 5-year plan was developed over a period of 2 years with the participation of students, faculty, and staff. And it represents an ambitious new vision for sustainability at Concordia on the topics of food waste, climate change, research, and curriculum. And following that initial launch event that we held last November, we are now offering our community members the opportunity to learn more about these plans through Q&A panel events like this one. So today you have the opportunity to learn more about the Sustainable Food Systems Plan and sustainable food practices at Concordia, and hear from our panel of experts about what they think is the most important priority for sustainable food. We can learn from the plan about the vision for how to support a more environmentally and socially sustainable food system here at Concordia. And I say here, I'm at home, but at Concordia, where we all interact either digitally or in person. So our event today is moderated by Marie-Josée Allard. Marie-Josée is the Director of Hospitality Concordia and has been deeply involved in discussions and implementation of the Sustainable Food Systems Plan. So I will pass it over to her now so that she can introduce our panelists, and she'll also let you know as audience members how you can participate in our discussion. So thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you enjoy this event.
Thank you, Cassandra. Before I introduce the panelists, I just want to say happy Fair Trade Week to everybody. This week is the Fair Trade Designated Campus across Canada, and we celebrate fair trade producers in the Global South and their partners to help raise awareness about the value of fair trade. And I hope that some of you had the chance to take a banana selfie this morning. We had this banana walking over the campus downtown, and having a picture gave you a chance to win fun stuff. So let me introduce you to our panelists. First, Sabrina Lavoie. Sabrina is the Director, Budget Planning and Business Development at VP Service and Sustainability. Jordan LeBel, Marketing Professor at GMSB and 3M National Teaching Fellow. Erik Chevrier, part-time instructor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, President and Chair of the Concordia Food Coalition, Board Member of the Concordia Greenhouse, and Farm Co-Coordinator of the Duff Court Urban Farm in Lachine. Sebastian Di Poi, Executive Director of the Sustainability Action Fund, Concordia Greenhouse Board Member, and former member of the Concordia Food Coalition and the Food Plan Committee. Thank you all for joining. So this event will be a Q&A discussion, and we encourage everybody to ask questions to our panelists through the chat. And I also encourage all the panelists to get engaged together and exchange, even though I'm going to ask sometimes specific questions to each of you. So let's start with a question that I will be addressing to the 4 panelists. And please just raise your hand if you want to answer first. So the Sustainability Food Plan addresses a broad range of priorities for the campus food system, from food services, purchasing targets, and supporting urban agriculture to reducing food insecurity and food waste. I would like to know which part of the food plan are you most excited about and why? So who would like to break the ice? Jordan, you're laughing, so here you go.
I'm laughing because it is such a broad question, but also it's such a broad plan. And I think that's something that has to be applauded. Concordia was proactive, was ambitious in setting that plan. So it's nice to see that it's comprehensive. It's not looking just as one little piece of the puzzle. Of course, coming where I come from, I'm excited about the impact on purchasing. If we want to change the state of things, if big players change their standard operating procedures, namely with purchasing and supply chain management, then that can send a signal all the way up the food chain or the value chain that things are moving and the end consumer wants change, and that can promote and provoke change all along the value chain. I also like the reduction in food waste because, quite frankly, we see a lot of headlines that we're going to run out of food in so many years. Not really true. I mean, if we cut down on food waste, everybody can eat. So I think that's important. And there's been so many development in upcycling, managing food waste. There's lots of very creative examples we can look at and best practices. So that's exciting. But also the food insecurity piece. I think we sometimes forget that many of our students on campus, sometimes even some of our colleagues, can suffer from food insecurities. The pandemic has underscored some of these deeply rooted problems, but food insecurity is not a simple issue. It has many components and dimensions. So I think those are the three things that are making me excited. But again, I applaud Concordia for taking on such an ambitious and broad-based project, and also my colleagues, Erik and Sebastian, for really getting invested and helping out and putting shoulder to the wheel on this plan.
Great, thank you, Jordan. Erik, maybe you want to jump in?
Yeah, perfect. Wonderful. So I also applied the Concordia University for coming up with such an ambitious plan and for the process to actually involve faculty and students. I do see this as a work in progress. I don't think any sustainability plan is perfect. And I think, we could root the sustainability plan in elements of social justice as well. The things that I really do appreciate from this plan is, especially coming as a professor, is a focus on experiential learning. So I think, Concordia is a really great resource of faculty who study food, but also students that want to implicate into communities to help build food sovereign communities. And I guess one example is as you mentioned, I'm coordinating the Duff Court Urban Farm and have brought students to actually take part in creating food sovereignty in Lachine by putting together this farm, feeding people in the Duff Court community where there is actually a food desert and food insecurity quite rampant in this area. And I think, given the resources of Concordia, we could think of food not just about feeding students on campus, but actually about making an impact on the community itself. And I think that the plan itself does lend to these possibilities. And I'm really excited to see this going forward.
Thank you. Sabrina, what about you?
Yeah, so obviously, I'm extremely happy to make a statement with the actual plan. So the university, the administration, which I represent in this panel, is actually putting down some real hard concrete targets, which is very important. There's a lot of talking happening, but when you really see concrete numbers, this is where the community can say, there you go, this is a statement, the university is very serious about it. So it's definitely something I'm excited about. The other piece you cover with experiential learning, it's the living lab. So we're providing the community with actually some funding in order to do some experience and projects, and having students, faculty, and staff mixing together to get to a common project. It's very exciting. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for Sebastian.
Yeah. Thank you, Sebastian.
Yeah, I can piggyback a little bit off of what Erik and Sabrina said, because from my point of view, especially when I was in the committee helping draft these plans, I was coming from the Concordia Food Coalition, so the student side of things. And one thing that I really appreciated seeing, and it's prevalent throughout, is a focus on either acknowledging, building up, and recognizing existing student initiatives. I think Concordia has always been very rich in the sense of student activism, student support for projects, student food-led initiatives with Le Frio Vert, The Hive, and People's Potato. And I think you see a focus on building these organizations up and giving them the support they need. So not just coming with a top-down approach to how we can improve the food system, but crowdsourcing knowledge from people who put in a lot of time and energy and have been on the ground doing the work. So I really appreciate that collaborative framework that has been taken in the drafting of this food plan.
Great. The name of the food plan is Sustainability Food System. So what does a sustainable food system mean for you, and what would a sustainable campus food system look like? So again, a question for all of you. Who would like to answer first? Erik?
Yeah, I don't mind jumping into this. Sustainability is quite a complex theory, and there's multiple ways to look at sustainability. The way that I think that a sustainable food system should look like is rooted in food sovereignty approaches. And the reason why I say that is because food sovereignty approaches look at empowering people to actually take part in their own food production, linking the community into empowering the communities to actually be part of food production, distribution, processing. And I think this is what is needed. As Jordan was pointing out, food supply chains are having issues. And I think relying on externalizing food and importing it from other countries is quite problematic, especially like things like arugula or radishes or things that we could produce really easily in local environments. I think if we're looking at a food sustainability plan for the university, I think that we need to think beyond just the campus. And I think that the universities actually have resources that could empower communities to become food sovereign themselves. And I think this is where we need to focus, is actually setting up food systems. So food production, processing, distribution, and waste management systems in and around the university by using the resources that we have available to us, using students to actually empower local communities through projects and courses, having researchers actually take part in looking at the plan, to empower the campus actors, but also to have an impact and to have positive impacts on the community at large. So this is the way that I see building a food sovereign campus. And actually, this is what I would say would be my approach to sustainability in that fashion.
Very interesting. Jordan, what about you? How do you see that?
I don't know that I've spent enough time to answer convincingly what it should look like. But what I don't want it to look like is something that falls prey to some of the headlines we're seeing and that plays on people's fear. I think we need to mobilize the science. Erik mentioned the resources we have. We have a lot of knowledge on campus. You look at some initiatives that have been carried out, those successful ones, and again, Cornell convened a panel last year that was the entire point, that any advancement in food systems development cannot be purely technological. We see a lot of emphasis right now on even Silicon Valley getting into the food business and billions of dollars being poured, of course, with the promise of finding the next big payout and unicorn. And I think that misses the mark that any sustainable food system has to have a blend of new tech and new ways of doing things, but not to overlook the socio-cultural piece. We often put a lot of weight on consumers' shoulders. When organic came around, well, consumers, just had to learn about organic and learn how to make healthy choices. Okay, when we go grocery shopping or make choices in a cafeteria kind of setting, there's a lot of other things on people's mind. I think of students with, now this is midterm, with stress, for exams and papers. We can't be putting the weight and everything on their shoulders saying, well, you have to make the right decision. We have to design a food system that blends tech advancements, but also sociocultural advancement to normalize a kind of behavior that plays up on that notion of a food citizen as opposed to food consumer. And I'm very critical of my own discipline. We love to talk about consumers and we're consuming and all of this. But really, beyond consumers, we're citizens. We're citizens who care about our own food and what we put into our body. But we should also care about the planet, except in a day-to-day, moment-by-moment decision-making type of perspective. Often those considerations are, well, I'm hungry, I have 5 minutes between class, I have, so many dollars to eat. And some of those considerations go out the window. And I think that's where in designing a sustainable food system, we can engineer an environment that not only builds up the tech developments, but factors in how do people, students, faculty, staff, the community make decisions about food, to make those decisions easier to make so that they are indeed sustainable. So I don't know that I've really answered your question, maybe in a roundabout way.
No, I really like this citizen part, and not talking about consumer. I kind of like this idea. What do you think about that, Sebastian? Any point that you would like to add, or how do you see this food system plan on campus?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about, I mean, it's not as simple to talk about the campus as its enclosed space anymore. I think, especially with COVID and understanding how projects don't live on campus as they used to, right? Everything has, especially in a university like Concordia, that really permeates into the surrounding areas. But when talking about the campus itself, I think having a focus that moves away from a profit-driven model that's driven by multinational corporations is definitely one aspect of it. I think having something that is either self-run by the university that allows more flexibility in terms of what options are provided, where the procurement is sought from. I think that's a really important aspect of changing the food system at Concordia. And I think that there are many models around the world and in Canada as well that have shown that self-run food systems or food systems that even outsourcing to let smaller suppliers that are not multinational food providers, I think really push the proverbial needle towards a more just and sustainable food system at Concordia.
Yeah, Jordan.
You asked us to piggyback on one another, so thank you,
Absolutely.
Sebastian, for making that point. And my mind went back to my early career when I was in Scandinavia. I lived in Norway for many years and was working at the Gastronomic Institute of Norway. We were working on Nordic cuisine, and of course, coming from a Scandinavian perspective, which probably biased me or influenced me unduly, but there's a lot to be said about transparency. You look at the government of Sweden, they put all government papers online. You can find out anything and everything you want. And it's a very Scandinavian thing to do. And I think in building a food system that people can trust, because trust is a bit the elephant in the room. I don't know why I said pink. I must have pink elephants in my brain. But people need to trust the food system. And so I think this notion of transparency, can I find out where my food comes from? Not after 50 emails, but within a few clicks, or maybe asking a couple of questions. I think that's the other thing we need to build in that food system, at least for at the student, at the consumer citizen level, at the end of the chain where people make the decision. If it can be a little bit more transparent, if it can be a little bit easier to, user friendly to make those kinds of good decisions, I think that would go a long way as well.
Good, thank you. Sabrina, you want to add anything?
I'd like to add maybe a different twist to this. We're talking about system in an ideal way. A system is organized. However, at Concordia, it's extremely complex in the sense there's so many different stakeholders. And on top of that, food is extremely it's very unique in the sense that people have their own preferences and own tastes. So some people, no matter what kind of education you're going to do, they're going to be very particular about the preference and the taste and all this. So it's a very complex animal to manage. I'm talking again with my administrator's hat. So we're trying to move the university in a fashion that will evolve, but from bottom up and top down approaches. So this is what we have in the food plan. If you look in there, you've got the admin that's really forcing targets and really trying to benchmark and have KPIs and all this, but you have as well the living labs and all the experiential learning, which are more like bottom up. So we're hoping that by many different poking of projects, like many different initiative and tactics, the system, again, I'm coming back to the system, will somehow move in the right direction, a direction where we want to go with very, very different stakeholders. So I just wanted to add that piece about systems and the complexity of it.
Thank you. Yes, Erik.
One thing that wasn't mentioned, I think is really important to this conversation is a conversation about externalities. So the food system itself is actually based on externalities where we don't pay the true cost of food. And I think that the food system itself is not sustainable. It's being managed by, injection of public money, by basically driving down labor costs, hiring migrant laborers in Canada, Canadian farms and across the world. By taxing the environment. And most of this is in the sake of profit seeking. So I think we need to address that. And I think that, by having these big, large corporations that are seeking as much profit as they can, the cost of the food then lies on the environmental costs and the social costs. And that is not sustainable. And I think these are the conversations that we need to address also in the food system.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to dig a little bit into the plan. So the plan had multiple targets related to the food service and food purchasing. As an example, we wanted to increase the purchasing of local and sustainable food to 50% of the food budget during the fall and 40% during the winter. Reduce animal-based purchasing to 30% of the food budget is another target, and increasing our purchasing of fair trade product is also a target. This question would be for Sabrina. What strategies the university is taking to reach its purchasing goal, like for local purchasing, fair trade, and plant-based?
So I can speak for the obviously the contracts that are managed under our umbrella, because there's the food plan includes all of the food on campus, which is also the student initiative and the tenants that we have and all this. So for the ones that we're managed, we're integrating within the contract some concrete targets and some numbers, some percentages, and some figures that we need to meet, and they're gradually increasing as the contract, let's say a 4-year contract. So the targets will not remain for year one, they will grow with the contract. This is one thing we're doing. The second thing, we just actually hire somebody. We realized that we really needed to have like a full-time person to look over all of this. And this is what we did. So we hire Oliver DeVolpe, somebody that has a ton of experience actually doing this. So I think it's going to really help us to watch and make sure that our contracts are respected. We will be publishing as well. We will be reporting on how we're doing. And should we not be able to meet targets, again, transparency, why? Is there a specific reason? Is it the market? Is it the industry? What's going on? So it's important to show what we've been able to achieve, regarding targets. So that wraps it up for me.
Any comments you would like to add on this, the other panelists? No? Yeah,
I think I like very much what Sabrina said is, looking at how things are evolving. And what I didn't hear from Sabrina, which I'm happy I didn't hear, is that, if at some point a supplier, can't meet quotas or can't meet the requirements, you don't necessarily just end that relationship. You work with that supplier. If you feel that there's promise to be developed there. I think relationship building is a key part of building more sustainable food system. It's not one-off and transactional type of approaches. Erik mentioned this notion of profit seeking, and I got so much heat years ago on television to say at some point we need to reevaluate the capitalistic foundations of our food system. Everybody's complaining, but if you have shares of Pepsi in your retirement fund, you're contributing to the problem, right? Because everybody wants higher returns, and Pepsi is getting 12% returns this year. How do you think they got that, right? So, and I don't mean to blame Pepsi. I mean, it's a whole systems approach, but I very much like the idea that, if we're going to build this, it's not over a 12-month outlook. It's looking long-term and making sure we build relationship and we don't throw out a partner just because on that point in time, they can't make it happen for whatever reason. We need to understand and then correct and go forward.
Can I add to that too?
Yes, absolutely.
Marie-José wants to go ahead, but we're all piggybacking on one another.
Okay, I have no problem. This is great. I love this discussion.
Well, because actually, I think what Jordan's saying here, strikes a moment for me is we need to build partnerships. And I think it's quite ambitious to set targets, and I'm not arguing against doing that. I think that's important to understand where we are and where we want to go. What I don't want to see is us relying on targets and stopping there. And I think that when Jordan's talking about relationships, this is really important, because to have a relationship with a farm from Quebec that actually is doing, organic farming or doing regenerative farming, to me is more important than trying to set a metric of like 50% and hitting that metric, because we could do better than that. And actually, I think by doing better is actually about forming these relationships and bringing them in as stakeholders. It's great to set metrics, and it's wonderful that we're thinking about these things, but we could also, form more stable relationships over time and hopefully be able to meet better targets.
And behind if I can add on this, behind the targets, there are the stories of binding with farmers. We had like an example with the steel cut oats, from Quebec, and was it from Quebec or from, I can't remember, but it was a local partner. So there's a whole bunch of like good stories that are behind that, because you don't have a choice. The target are based on local procurement. You will have the local farmers behind that. There's no other way around it. So yeah.
I'm going to move on another topic, the plant-based purchasing. So as I mentioned, it's one of the target of the food plan, and what we want to do is really to reduce the purchase of animal-based product like meat, cheese, eggs to 30% of the food service budget. This will require food service to reduce animal-based purchasing by 25% over the couple of years. So I would like to know from you, Sebastian, could you share why reducing the consumption of animal-based product was included in the sustainability plan? What was the idea around this?
Yeah, well, I think just understanding the carbon footprint that conventional meat farming and animal-based products in a conventional sense, again, stressing that how that contributes to human-induced climate change. And I think that's kind of where we're realizing, okay, if we're going to continue to buy from conventional suppliers, then there's also something that needs to go hand in hand with that, and that's an educational campaign about having people reduce their meat consumption as well. So while I do think that it was really important to do so and push people towards having more plant-based products, I think also people need to be cognizant of what kind of plant-based products they're using, right? Because if they're only using GMO soy and things like that, well, then we understand that also is occupying a lot of, it just supports monoculture and conventional type farming as well. So if people are going to use meat-based products, and Erik kind of alluded to this in his recent answer, talking about regenerative farmers. So one of the few things that we know now that we can do towards moving towards battling climate change and human-induced climate change events is to support regenerative farming. So people that have no-tilling, rotational grazing animals, especially, and cows and other bovines have an incredible capacity to regenerate landscapes. So I think having this as a long-term vision of rest, yes, it is good to reduce the amount of meat and animal-based products that we use, but if we're going to eat animal-based products and meat, that we need to try to focus on people who are stewarding the land in a way that we know that can battle climate change, really.
Jordan, I see you reacting, and actually the next question is for you, but please go ahead and react to what Sebastian just said.
It's music to my ears that RA, or regenerative agriculture, is coming into this discussion. 2 years ago, I created a new lecture within my food marketing class on RA based on the work I've been doing with Regeneration Canada. I grew up on a farm. So the importance and the place of animal grazing within a regenerative philosophy of agriculture, within that kind of ecosystem, for me, is just natural. We've vilified cows and beef, as the perpetrators of all evil, the cause of all greenhouse gas emission. But I think if you dig in beyond the headline, the problem is not the cow. The problem is the industrial approach to agriculture. And that's what we need to change. And I love this notion of an education campaign and creating a a teachable moment for our students, for our staff, for faculty to educate themselves, to educate others. The last night, I really had a moment in class. I think maybe Sabrina or even you, Marie-Josée, are aware last year, food service were a client in my class. We look at ways we can try to nudge people off land-based menu choices. And as part of that, I connected with Alan Nash from the geography department. His students were doing an exercise to compute some of the carbon footprint of dishes on the menus in the dining hall. And I brought that up to my class and I said, you know, one of the takeaways from last year is that it's so difficult to put an amount on carbon footprint, you know, what do we include and what not? And it so turns out that one of Alan's students from that semester was in my class last night. And she said, sir, can I say something about that? And the moment for me was how, you know, what was an experiential learning exercise in 2 classes have now contaminated, have now put RA, carbon footprint, on the radar screen of many students. They can learn more, they can, you know, fuel their decision process now and look into these kinds of things. So for me, I love this coming into the discussion because it goes far beyond the headlines of eat a cricket protein bar and save the planet. Well, no, you're really not going to save the planet by eating a cricket bar. I get very critical of these kinds of marketing ploys, so I apologize if I'm a little bit biased.
I think the communication and educational piece is to be improved at Concordia. We have the mission of I mean, we are a university. I think we could do this better, and I want to do this in the plan. I mean, of course, when there's going to be more people on campus, it's going to do the job even more, because right now it's very difficult to pass a message. Nobody looks at emails. And so once we're, let's say 2022 and on, we have to remember most of the people that's in this discussion today, our level of knowledge is way beyond a majority of people on these things. Like, how would I accept a different menu if I don't even understand the carbon footprint? Like if I don't get it. So the educational piece is going to be key, and I think we can do that better, and I'm going to be actively working on it with my colleagues, of course.
Yeah, Erik, you wanted to also react on what Jordan just said?
Yeah, actually, so to echo, I guess, Jordan and Sebastian, I agree with what you're saying. I guess one moment of caution for, you know, advocating for elimination of meat products is about cultural understandings also. And, you know, a lot of people kind of vilify indigenous populations for polar bear hunting or for seal hunting. You know, these are part of traditional ways. And I would say that, you know, these ways are way more sustainable than the way that other people produce, like factory farm and other things like that. So, you know, I'm a vegetarian myself, and I advocate for people to reduce meat consumption. But I think we have to be cognizant of the privilege that it comes with to actually be able to make these choices too.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, I'm going to just take this word from Erik to know, like, what are the strategy? You're saying you're a vegetarian, but what would be the strategy that you've seen in your research that will help, you know, people to reduce their meat consumption? Is there any way or a strategy that we can take for that?
Well, Erik pointed out the importance of cultural factors and traditions and things like that. So I think you have to be cognizant or look at all the barriers. For some, the issue might be, well, I'm holding on to my rituals and I just have to have turkey, and I just have to have roast beef on Sunday or whatever it is, right? And once you deconstruct that, then you can, you know, start talking, not so much to the converted. A lot of efforts right now of new vegan products or whatnot are talking to the converted. You know, they're talking to people who've already, like Erik, are high up on their learning curve, and they've changed their habits already. I think the folks we need to reach, to echo some of what Sabrina was saying about, you know, outreach initiatives and the educational pieces, reach those who are on the fence. I've heard about it, but, you know, I'm not convinced. And those who are like, well, you know, we need to reach out and try to understand what can be done. And I think there's a series of arguments that can be used. For some, it may be, hey, this is just as good. You know, we can, you know, the texture, the taste, everything is there. Others, it may be, yeah, it has to be convenient, right? This year in my class, I have these 2 women that during the pandemic, these 2 moms during the pandemic started a company called Epic Tofu. It's a conveniently pre-chopped, seasoned organic from Quebec. I mean, it hits all the buzzwords, right? But my point is, well, for some people, it may be more the convenience. For others, it may be the price. And for some, it may be, you know what, I'm still a holdout. I'm not going to replace the meat. So maybe we can put a side salad on your radar screen that includes chickpeas. And once we've done that, then we can move to something else. We may need to think about a stepwise type of strategy. The other thing that I think, and this is as much for you in the food service arena as food retailers, we need to stop pitching those alternatives that almost scare people who are not like Erik, high up on the learning curve. It's always packaged with green and sort of anti-meat messages. I think we need to tone it down a little bit and just say, this is regular food. It's just as good, right? I mean, go talk to people in the Mediterranean Sea or whatnot. They don't make a distinction. I mean, it's all part of the diet, and stop pitching it as something that's like, or that's, you know, just as good as. Position it as on its own merits. And I think that can actually seduce people more than that comparison we're trying to make all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. Let's move a little bit to the urban agriculture now. I mean, this topic is super interesting. I think that we could talk a lot about it, but urban agriculture is also a goal of the plan. And I would like to ask Sebastian and Erik to react on this question. So for you, what is the role of urban agriculture in a sustainability food system? And what are the current potential impact of urban agriculture on campus? Like by impact, I mean in terms of community building, learning, food production, environment, etc. Sebastian?
Yeah, I don't mind stepping in first. I mean, I think one enormous aspect of urban agriculture that it allows entry for people who are not familiar with getting their hands dirty, with preparing food. I think there are a lot of smaller scale initiatives, and again, we're specifically talking on campus, and I'm more specifically talking about Sir George Williams. I especially with the greenhouse, it gives people a possibility to just get involved to a very light extent, and then that really builds on itself over and over and over as people get more involved in urban agriculture. Really just utilizing the various small spaces that we have on campus to get people excited about growing food. And the more people grow food, the more cognizant they are about the food that they produce, that they consume. And so that really will affect the food that they cook for themselves, how they view the food system. And then even moving past just Sir George Williams, but at Loyola, well, now you're talking about places that can actually be a little bit more productive and can start having an impact on the procurement side of things, of where are we getting our food. And I know Erik on his side of things with the farm in Lachine, I mean, that just goes to an even a larger scale of the kind of impact that these projects can have. So first off, I think as an educational and engagement aspect, I think urban agriculture has a huge potential, especially when you're connecting it with professors and longer term stakeholders at the university to kind of funnel students and funnel other members of the university into these initiatives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Erik, you want to jump in?
Yeah. So I agree with Sebastian, actually. I do think it is an entry point for a lot of people to actually understand their food. And this is what I've noticed is a lot of people actually like to come out to the garden and don't really know how a lot of the stuff grows. So for a lot of people to actually interact with their food, I think it really helps in understanding the process. A lot of people do go to the grocery store and they don't understand how food is made. It's really easy to waste food when you don't really have respect for the process. But when we're producing things and they see how much labor of love really go into producing the food, then I think it changes people's mentality. The other thing that I think it does is it connects community together. So we've had a lot of people come out to learn how to, harvest different things or learn how to take care of tomato plants or whatever the case is. And, we built a very strong community in Lachine. And, it's a community of people that love to produce food, but also other people that just came out for fun that actually do appreciate relating to others in this environment. Other things, I think, we create biodiversity in a city where, we could actually have multiple varieties of plants. At the Duff Court Urban Farm, we had 8 different varieties of heirloom tomatoes, things that you wouldn't find at the grocery store. And we didn't sell them as specialty products. It was basically just the tomatoes that we had available. We have other things as well. We have a perennial garden. So we have like milkweed and, beeweed and things like that attract pollinators, attract monarch butterflies. So we're really trying to create a polyculture in an urban environment. We're actually reducing transportation of food. Like, I mentioned previously, there's no reason to purchase arugula from Dole, who is importing it from California. It doesn't make any logical sense. Arugula produces within like 2 weeks. We could grow it really easily. It's hard to kill arugula. Radishes and other things like that also. But I think we have to understand the limits to urban agriculture as well. So like, we're not going to produce wheat in urban agriculture farms. We just need a lot more space. We're not doing kind of the traditional soy and corn production because it doesn't really make sense to do that in the environments that we have. Plus, I guess in our farm, we're trying to create a polyculture and not a monoculture. I could probably talk about this for another half an hour here, but I guess I could stop with all of these different benefits, but also to understand the different limitations.
I can continue on maybe the greenhouse, because we talked about Loyola, but for downtown, the educational piece doesn't require a mass production. You can have like it could be very, very effective just on its own, doing little things. So we're trying to revive the greenhouse. It's as you can imagine, a big project, but we're working on it. We're trying to find budgets and people that would be interested in upgrading the facilities and all that. But even as we wait for that, we can still program the greenhouse right now in its current state. So we're because as you know, things takes a long time to happen, but we're not going to wait 3 years or whatever time, so I had discussion with Cassandra on that. There's a lot of people that are interested by the greenhouse in downtown. So I'm really hoping, I'm pushing in anyways to try to revive it in an accelerated fashion.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, anything you would like to add about?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure you do.
I'm dreaming in Technicolor here. I'm taking notes and like, how fun would it be to have an applied food systems minor or bachelor at Concordia, where part of the requirements would be to spend 3 credits, 6 credits working with Erik in the field, or I mean, that would put us so much on the map, but also form generations of students that could, ripple effects. I think that's one of the pieces that's missing. Erik talked about the connectivity and the relationship building that can come of rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty. I fully agree with that, way beyond what we can effectuate in a classroom or in a lab. So I'm sorry, my brain just went in that direction.
That's great. But before we get to this new program, I know that the Sustainability Action Fund, you do have some initiative, Sebastian, that you put on. Maybe you would like to talk a little bit about those projects and how people could be involved, because we can put our hands in the land and do something.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, SAF's been around since 2007, and since then there have been a lot of initiatives that have received funding, whether it's Campus Potager, the greenhouse itself. I mean, heck, the Hive as well has received funding. I'm talking about urban agriculture. I mean, one specific project that has sustained over the past few years and is only expanding is the Mind, Heart, Mouth project over at Loyola. So it's an urban agriculture initiative led by a student called Andrea Tremblay. And there's a very intergenerational focus. And I think when we're talking about our food system not just being contained to our university and to our campus, but especially there over at Loyola, they understand that they are in a food desert in that part of NDG. And they link up with other organizations on around NDG as well to redistribute some of the food. So they have taken some plots over at Loyola, and they're growing a diversity of food. Of course, I mean, it's not organic certified, but it is all completely organic, no pesticides, no chemicals of any kind. Plus, it really brings in community. So Mind, Heart, Mouth, yeah, exactly, Cassandra. They also supply some of the food for the Hive Cafe and for the free lunch program. So really finding these links, getting these projects linked up with folks who need the produce that they're growing, I think is really important. And we are lucky to be in a place as the Sustainability Action Fund where we have enough visibility that when people are thinking about starting these projects, that we can offer them funding. But even further than that, is recognizing the space that we have on campus, especially over at Loyola, to allocate towards urban agriculture. And you really see a lot of that reflected in the food systems plan. And I just wanted to talk about another one that's not necessarily staff related, but very relevant. That's a part of the greenhouse, which is City Farm School. City Farm School is essentially a farm apprenticeship program for students. It's not part of the university's curriculum per se, but it is I've done the program as well. They do a lot of focus on medicinals, and of course on smallholder farming. So this really diverse perennial based systems of farming. It offers an excellent entry point for not just students, but community members as well. And it connects people to other organizations in the area that not just build up the Concordia food system, but these food system, in the greater Montreal area as well.
Thank you. Before we continue, I just want to know, Cassandra, do we have any question from people attending right now? I know that you're monitoring the chat. Just want to make sure that I will give the opportunity to answer some of those questions. Anything that you would like to point out?
Yes, we currently have 3 questions living in the Q&A. And the chat has been very nice and active, but mainly positive comments in the chat. So the questions are really living in the Q&A right now. The first one is mostly a comment about some of the opportunities we have to build partnerships in Concordia. So this is from an anonymous attendee, but they're pointing out that we should be using our communications to benefit not just the Concordia community, but Montreal, to become a source of inspiration and get the food conversation going. How cool would it be if we had a panel like this with other universities as well, for instance? And we have a question about the amount of paved space between the FB building. Specifically, what would it take to turn a location like that into a place for urban agriculture? What kind of challenges would need to be overcome to make it worthwhile from the point of view of yield? And how would the produce ideally be used? Does anyone have any thoughts on a project like that at Concordia?
So maybe I can answer from a facilities point of view, from having research, like, doing no research. There is probably an access issue there, in the sense that there's a lot of there's the faubourg, right? All the commercial area that's there behind. So it's access for emergency purposes and all this. So I am not sure if this location would actually cut it, but something to look at. Our facilities management architects, they're called facilities planning team. They're the best to approach in order to review all of that. We do, when we ask them, we're trying to push them to get more food location. It's the same, it would be the same thing for urban agriculture. I think Paul Blouin, manager in facilities management, was involved in that. So if we can give further resources after this webinar, if you're interested in digging further.
Yeah, and I can hop in too and say that we are in discussion of how we can do a formal assessment of the university spaces in collaboration with the campus master plan process that's currently underway, to really make an inventory of the pieces of our campus that could be used for urban agriculture initiatives, and then set a formal process in place for people to request the use of those spaces. So I'm not sure specifically about the area behind the Faubourg, but that kind of initiative is coming our way for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Erik?
So on that topic, there is a space right in back of the Faubourg that's currently not being used, that used to be part of Campus Potager. So, there is some access to space available, and it would be really great if a student group could come and take that one over, because the beds are still there. They're just kind of overgrown with weeds right now. And I guess kind of to address the second part of that question, I guess, what could be done with the food? What I would recommend is actually having a group of students that are involved with this farm or garden or whatever you want to call it, but basically to grow food for their own procurement for the time being, do spin farming and try to see what could be produced, because the space in back of the Faubourg is not very large for Campus Potager. If that could be expanded, we're talking about a different venture here. But for now, that would be a really fun thing to get off the ground and up and running. I know Sebastian was working on this way back in the day also.
I'm just going to jump in here, because one of the thoughts that I have, these are great ideas. I mean, they're all great initiatives that can eventually lead to something. I would say, as a faculty member who's been here for 20 years, one of the things that I would like to see in parallel is that, you know, if these eventually become reality, we keep people in the loop, we keep people informed. Only a few years ago, as I was writing a paper, did I find out that my school was one of the first signatories of a UN compact on embedding sustainability in business curriculum. And I was like, I've been here for more than 15 years and I didn't know we were the first, right? My point is there's just so many things going on around. Concordia has an incredible momentum right now. There's a bunch of things going around. And if you're interested in these things, sometimes you don't know of everything that's going around that you could connect with and say, hey, I can bring an additional piece, or maybe we can partner. And I know in my course, I'm always looking for things to bring in and put on students' radar screen. At some point, it's tiring if you're always clicking and doing that work yourself to look into these things. So it'd be fun to have some sort of mechanism that keeps food, you know, I was going to say foodies, I hate that term, but, you know, people interested in food related matters at Concordia, if we could keep somehow connected and be aware of what's going on, because we could probably find ways to help each other more than we currently do.
Mm-hmm.
That was I'm allowed one pet peeve per day. That was my pet peeve. That was my comment.
There is the food advisory working group. We're meeting once in a while. Maybe the frequency is not enough in the sense that there's so much talk and there's so much topic and subject, and we could actually start subcommittees from there for a specific project. We just talked about the campus potager ou je sais pas trop. So that these are things that not everybody in the FOG in the food advisory working group is interested in certain things, but definitely subcommittees could be created. Yes.
Cassandra, I think that we have another question.
Yes. Do you gather information on the type of students in terms of their discipline that come to Concordia's greenhouse? What's the awareness level of it on campus, and what do you do to drive more student traffic and involvement there?
I can speak maybe a little bit to it. I mean, I'm a new greenhouse board member, but I mean, I've been kind of affiliated through various projects at the greenhouse. I don't know if they keep kind of stats on how many on what faculty students are coming from. I know there are a lot of geography students just from the proximity, as well as some engineering students. But I think where the greenhouse serves as a really important point is that it's kind of this hub that has like these tentacles that spread out in the community. So it's this central area where there's a lot of experimentation happening, different plants being grown, diversity workshop spaces. I mean, at its height, the greenhouse was putting on workshops every single day. And you had people from different farms, different organizations coming in. So this is really where it can be used as an incredible resource in the heart of downtown. So yeah, that's kind of what I understand in terms of the people that go there. But yeah, really just having it as a space for people to visit and see, okay, I'm in a place that I'm surrounded by plants. That's slowly gonna open people up to being more involved and getting their hands dirty.
Mm-hmm. So we will probably conclude, because we have 5 minutes in front of us. My God, this conversation is very interesting. But similar to the other stream of the plan, engaging the Concordia community is a key part of the food plan, and offering opportunity for students to get involved in improving the campus food system is very important. So final question to everyone. What is one way that people can get involved in improving our food system? And are there any specific experiential learning project that you would like to see happen on campus? And I think that for all of us, it's important, this experiential learning piece. Who would like to start answering this? Erik, maybe?
I could jump in, sure. Yeah, I guess when it comes to people on campus that are interested in participating in the food movement, let's just call it that for now, we have the Concordia Food Coalition that's spearheaded a bunch of really amazing initiatives. But there's also a multitude of organizations on campus that could actually benefit from people getting involved. So the People's Potato, and I think they're actually currently hiring, if I'm not mistaken. There's the Hive, which is a solidarity co-op. There's a whole bunch of food initiatives. So I think that, we don't lack the possibilities. Students could actually just come and get involved with any of these projects. When it comes to experiential learning, myself, actually, this is one of the main forms of learning that I take in the classroom. So I involve my students in participating in the food system. And I think this is really important. I'd like to encourage other professors to start thinking about this also, because I know that there's only a few of us that are actually getting our students to be implicated in the larger picture. And I think for students, it's really good for learning, but it's also good for the community to actually develop our food infrastructure through the resources of student labor.
Good. Any other point that people would like to bring about experiential learning?
Yes, I suggest whoever's interested can go to the Food Sustainability Plan website and find out what are the targets and what's in the plan actually. Any questions, any additional involvement, there's the Food Advisory Working Group. You can contact me, Sabrina Lavoie, or Marie-Josée in order to get involved. It'd be our pleasure to see where your ideas fit within the existing plan. And if it's a brand new idea that's not within the plan, we can discuss it too.
Jordan, oh yes, go ahead, Sebastian.
Yeah, I just quickly before we conclude today, I wanted to try to promote a focus on iterative learning, right? So building on experiences and initiatives that have happened in the past, instead of people trying to just within their own brain kind of reinvent a new idea. Because I think this is something that naturally happens with large scale institutions, that there's a lot of siloed work. So I think people when they have ideas, not just kind of going ahead, and again, I don't want to squash creativity. I think it's very important, but about contacting folks who are already working in the food system at Concordia specifically, and speaking with them, because a lot of them tend to have experience on, okay, what has worked, what has not worked, what did it need, where can you fit in, and that really kind of support the folks who are already working on creating a better food system, and have your ideas support their work, while of course promoting your ideas.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Jordan, to conclude.
I love that last comment from Sebastian. I think we need to collectively look at what we can individually do on a daily basis. I think bringing mindfulness to our food choices to really appreciate what we're selecting, what we're putting in our mouth. And if we're curious, doing that little extra step of clicking and trying to find out where does it come from, what is going on campus that I can get involved with. I've been on experiential learning. I have every year. You've been one of the clients in my class. It's not always hitting the bullseye, it's hit or miss, but I think it serves the purpose of putting things on students' radar screen. And I think the more we talk about it, the more connection points we're going to find, and that's how we can eventually grow our initiatives at Concordia. It's just this panel alone has set my mind buzzing, and there's lots of takeaways I can embed and follow up on. So thank you for making me part of it.
We have 1 minute. Do you have one last word that you would like to say to people watching us about the food plan and how they can be involved? One word that would, conclude and packaging of the hour we just spent together.
Before long, we're going to have lots of reason. We already have lots of reasons to be proud of Concordia, but before long, our approach to food will be an additional one.
Thank you.
My word. It's governance. Governance is extremely important because it is critical for all the other initiatives to grow and to flourish. So from the administration point of view, governance has to be focused on that, that's for sure.
So I don't have one word, but one thing that I think would, one thing that I want to lend credence to is Concordia is making an effort here to actually improve the foodscape. And I appreciate that a lot, because not a lot of schools are actually embarking on this process. And I know, inviting myself on the panel or other people that might be critical of the process is something that is forthcoming by the administration here. So we're having a great dialogue, and I think it's going to be messy the way that we actually make this unfold, but at the same time I think we're all in the right place trying to do the best that we can, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Sebastien, anything else to add?
I really echo what Erik said. I'm very thankful to be part of this process, because I know being part of the food plan committee, I definitely was critical about some aspects of how our food system has developed over time, but knowing that people are being humble and asking questions and involving all the stakeholders. We all eat, we all have opinions, and we all are learning. I think that's a really important aspect of moving forward together and creating a more sustainable food system. So thanks again. for inviting us.
Jordan, Sabrina, Erik, Sebastian, thank you very much. It was super interesting, nice conversation, and we have to do this again later, that's for sure. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.